And then moving on to Everton, they've appointed Mark Howard KC to lead their defence in the compensation case with Burnley. That obviously some clubs have dropped out of that, it appears. How much would that claim be worth, do you think?
So it's very difficult to speculate, but I did write a piece on my Substack, which people can have a look at if they wanted a sort of deep dive into how it might work and what the claim might look like. But just to give you an indication, they lost around about £58 million of broadcast money, dropping out of the Premier League and going into the Championship in that season. So the complexity here is that Everton breached in 21-22, but because of the delay in processing it, the penalty was applied in 23-24. Now, Burnley are saying, well, hang on a minute. What we are claiming is what would have happened but for the breach by Everton. So, had Everton not overspent, we say, we being Burnley, we would have survived. And that would either have happened because Everton got 4 less points or some other possibility, right? So, however it looks, let's appraise the chance that Burnley would have survived in that scenario. And I think they got a really good chance of showing, given that Everton have admitted the overspending. So remember, in the 6-point deduction, that was on the basis that Everton admitted that they breached. Okay, so that's not in question. So then the only question for a hearing or for discussion in settlement discussions or mediation is the damage and whether you can show causation, i.e. that Everton's overspending contributed, I would say really and substantially, to Burnley being disadvantaged and therefore getting relegated. Now I think there's a good chance, I won't bore you with the technical detail, but there's a good chance that this is a loss of a chance claim. And I think there's a good chance that, a very good chance that Burnley can show causation here and can show that but for Everton's overspending, that they would have survived. And therefore, they are entitled to a proportion of that lost revenue. Let's say, headline. So headline 58 million lost revenue. Now, when you delve a bit deeper, there's a few complexities there. First of all, Burnley were a side with clearly some very, very good clauses in their player contracts because they managed to drop their wage bill broadly 50% in the Championship. So it looks like their players were on very, very severe pay drops on relegation. Now, net, when you take the fact that they got the parachute payment in the season that they were in the Championship, following their relegation, they actually probably didn't lose very much versus what their performance would have been financially in the Premier League. Because what would have happened is in the Premier League they'd have had the extra £50 million, let's say, of revenue. They could say, well, we wouldn't have finished bottom. We wouldn't have finished in the bottom 3 that subsequent season. So actually we'd have got a high merit payment and therefore we lost out on not only what our revenue was in 21-22, but we think theoretically we would have been able to get an extra sponsorship deal, or we would have got 3 extra places up the league, or etc., etc. So they might argue that they've got a loss above the 58 headline loss of broadcast. But you've then got to assess that for actually how they mitigated that situation with cutting the wage bill and everything else. And so their overall sort of loss of profits, so their actual loss, is probably pretty low. I mean, it might not be much more than 10 million quid that they're claiming for. And then the way this might work is that there might be an adjustment for it for percentage probability that the on a loss of a chance that they wouldn't have been relegated. So it may be reduced by, let's say, 25%, 50%. So I would think that you're looking probably at a best case, let's say £10 million, maybe 15. It's interesting that the Tevez case many years ago now ended up being worth £18 million for Sheffield United, and that's in a different world. So that would argue that my estimate is too low. But my estimate is based on Burnley's numbers quite specifically. So I think Burnley, I reckon 10 to 15 million is a sort of headline, but then a discount to that for the probability adjustment, that some kind of discount for how it's, because it's not certain that they would have survived. So yeah, I think this is unlikely actually to end up in a hearing. I think the likelihood is that they'll do a deal, and Everton will pay them, something, and they'll settle it out of court. I mean, not court, because just to be clear, it's never court. Okay, we hear this a lot. It has to be arbitrated because clubs can't go to court over their disputes. They have to do it within either the Premier League rules or the FA rules. It all has to be arbitration or a hearing. This one will probably be, and this is what Everton might not like actually, this might press Everton to do a deal, because the likelihood is that this case is under it's called W51.5, which is the Premier League rule, and that would mean that it was the original independent commission who gave Everton the 10-point deduction that would be making the decision here, and Everton might not like the look of that, because we know that they went very hard on Everton. So they obviously weren't very impressed with Everton's behaviour, and in that case Everton might go, well look, we just got too much risk here, so we should do a deal.
Then in terms of the executive team at Everton, Kevin Thelwell and Richard Kenyon are to leave after Angus Kinnear's appointment has now been confirmed. Is it no real surprise that TFG are looking to shake things up after the takeover and get their own people in place?
Well, it's no real surprise, but I guess the sort of sweeping everybody away without necessarily having given them proper time to impress the new ownership or even the new chief executive. I mean, you're talking about people leaving before the new executive comes in, new chief executive comes in. So Angus Kinnear probably does know those individuals, you would think, from being in the game for a long time. So maybe they've never got on, maybe he doesn't rate them, I don't know. But I think it's reasonable to make changes, but it's slightly surprising, I guess, in some ways, that they're not being given the chance to have some time in front of the new management team to show what they can do or impress them. But they obviously just want a complete change of direction.